On getting the news of his son's death, Iyase Ekpenede, dressed in his full war regalia, he marched down into Benin with some of his warriors. While he was going to Benin, he had his special headgear on called Ugbogie. Ugbogie is the headgear Ekpenede will wear whenever he's going to honor live kings in other territory. But he's wearing this into the heart of Benin, into the palace of Oba Ehengbuda. Wow. When he got into Benin, he asked his warriors to halt. He marched into Benin all by himself. When he got to the palace of Oba Ehengbuda, he requested the presence of Oba Ehengbuda, but he wasn't granted the request. He was asked to retire to his abode, where he resided before the Oyo War at Ogbe. He stayed for some days and he was called back. They told him that if he was to come and see the Oba, he should dress in his normal shifting attire. Few days go by. Oba Ehengbuda requested the presence of Iyase Ekpenede. Iyase Ekpenede got to the palace and sat alone at Uwazolwa, where Oba Ehengbuda would receive his chiefs on that day. Oba Ehengbuda was coming out to sit on the throne. The other chiefs greeted the Oba, appellated him, and married. They all sat down in their various positions. Ekpenede refused to acknowledge the presence of Oba Ehengbuda. He even refused to greet Oba Ehengbuda. Iyase Ekpenede stood up in anger, walked straight to the presence of Oba Ehengbuda without greeting Oba Ehengbuda formally or appellating him as usual. He lamented bitterly. He asked Oba Ehengbuda if he hasn't sacrificed enough for the empire, if he hasn't gotten enough scars for the empire. Ekpenede cried bitterly in the presence of Oba Ehengbuda, and he asked Oba Ehengbuda if unaliving his only surviving son at this age was what Oba Ehengbuda could use as a payment for every sacrifice he had took for the empire. Iyase Ekpenede told Oba Ehengbuda that all the gifts I sent into Benin was sent through Chief Oshodin and Chief Unwagwe Osokrikpa, and so many other chiefs, they knew about this. Iyase Ekpenede asked Oba Ehengbuda, my son has been unalived, even when you knew that I cannot give birth anymore, I cannot produce anymore, I am now old and impotent. Oba Ehengbuda was quiet. Oba Ehengbuda was in shock, and he replied Iyase Ekpenede that I know nothing about the death of your son. I didn't give consent for your son to be executed, though I know he was arrested, but I know nothing about the gift you sent, and I know nothing about his hanging. Chief Oshodin and Chief Unwagwe and some other chiefs that knew about this locked their heads to their leg. They sat mute. They couldn't say anything. Oba Ehengbuda himself was in shock that the only son, Idodia, of Ekpenede has been unalived. These chiefs had embezzled every single gift Iyase Ekpenede sent. Oba Ehengbuda told Iyase Ekpenede to retire back to his abode at Ogbe. Iyase Ekpenede retired back. Oba Ehengbuda told him that he will look for a way, he will make efforts to fix his loss. After much deliberation, Oba Ehengbuda had no option than to give his only daughter, Princess Isua, to Iyase Ekpenede. He gave him to reproduce into the household of Iyase Ekpenede. But at this point, Iyase Ekpenede was old and impotent. He can't produce anymore. But the Oba had no option. He just had to do this. Iyase Ekpenede stayed back at Ogbe in Benin. He continued his service to the Oba as the Iyase. His new wife, Princess Isua, had a Down syndrome. She was popularly called Orinya, meaning over-pampered child. She was like this because the syndrome made her laugh over serious issues and she frowned over unserious issues. Iyase Ekpenede was very rich. He had livestock of different species. He had a vast compound. Inside this vast compound, there was this quadrangle, a rectangular quadrangle, which the Benin called Oterodo. Inside this quadrangle, he had a very deep well. One day, while Ekpenede was absent from the house, one of his calves fell into this well. The mother of this calf was hovering around. The daughter of Oba Ehengbuda, Princess Isua, was standing very close to this quadrangle. She smiled and laughed over this very situation instead of calling for help. Not too long on the same day, Iyase Ekpenede returned from the palace function he had attended. When he got to the house, he looked at Princess Isua and looked over the situation she was laughing at. Of course, I told you she had a Down syndrome. Iyase Ekpenede was still trying to figure out why Princess Isua laughed at this very horrific situation. Princess Isua in turn replied Iyase Ekpenede that I laughed over this situation because it looked exactly like that of your son, Prince Idodia. Iyase Ekpenede was shocked. Princess Isua went further to say that the mother of this calf that fell into the well is very powerful among all animals. Despite it says the well took its child and it was hovering around, mooing around. So as your child was taken from you, you as a powerful war general, you couldn't do anything. All you could do is to cry and lament bitterly around. This was touched Iyase Ekpenede, but he didn't react on that very day. He kept mute. Not too long, on a very great day, Iyase Ekpenede informed Oba Ehengbuda that he was going to Gwohun, meaning he was going to serve his head, which is a normal practice in Benin called Igwe festival. Iyase Ekpenede was granted the permission to serve his head by Oba Ehengbuda. Oba Ehengbuda even gave him some of the items he needed. Iyase Ekpenede gathered every item needed for an Igwe ceremony. He replaced the cow that is supposed to be slaughtered on that very day with Princess Isua in his heart. He dug a very long and deep well inside his compound. He presented Princess Isua to all the gods and Osun he had in his house. After that, he asked some of his servants to push Princess Isua inside this well. So Princess Isua was also murdered by Iyase Ekpenede on that very day. Iyase Ekpenede unalived each and everyone in his household. He left just one nephew of his, which was called Osemivie. He told Osemivie, even now that you are a teenager, I'm leaving you alive so you can reproduce and fill the household and the lineage of my ancestors. I don't want it to go extinct. This is the reason I left you alive. So Ekpenede, after that, asked Osemivie to look for another place to reside, and he asked him out of the house. Days after, Oba Ehengbuda got this news, and he quickly sent for Ekpenede to report himself to the palace. Iyase Ekpenede knew what was to come after he had done this, so he slaughtered each and every one of his livestock in his household. The ones they could eat, they ate. The ones they couldn't, wasted. Iyase Ekpenede buried each and every one of his gifts, his items that he had ever achieved in his lifetime. He buried them in an unknown location till date. Why will Ekpenede do this to his own property? This is because back in the days, it was a tradition that whoever passes away without a child, automatically his properties will be shifted to the sitting Oba. So Ekpenede didn't want Oba Ehengbuda to achieve a pin from whatever he had. Ekpenede was a mystical human being. He had every potent charms a warlord could have as at that time. He was planning to unalive himself, but not just himself alone. Ekpenede made sure that whoever saw his body must die an instant death. Ekpenede tied a suicide rope, 50 to his left side and 49 to his right side. He placed one at the middle, which made it 100. He unalived himself by committing suicide with that same rope. Iyase Ekpenede had vowed that he will make Benin to feel his wrath, and he made a statement in Edo that meaning Edo will become a naked place. Ekpenede was naked before he hanged himself. Every single person that passed through that road on that very day and the other day hanged themselves on the other remaining ropes. 98 people hanged themselves to these ropes. It was remaining just one space. The Oba and the chiefs heard this in the palace and they were in shock. Oba Ehengbuda and the chiefs were looking for solutions on how to stop the calamity that just before them. They called every priest and they called everyone they could call. Who will bear the cat? Who will drop Ekpenede from this suicide rope? Nobody could come out, but just one man called Ogboy, who had a deformity with one of his legs. He was popularly called Adowene Kode due to the condition of his leg. Adowenekode volunteered that he would go to Ekpenede's house to drop Ekpenede from that rope. And he was asked by Ehengbuda and the chiefs, "Are you sure you can do this?"
Adowenekode replied,
"This has become a parable in Benin since 16th century. This means only circumstance that will result to death will chase me away from the house of Ekpenede." Adowenekode was a very close friend of Iyase Ekpenede. This was how he knew so much on how to neutralize the sham Ekpenede used on himself. So he blindfolded himself and went straight to Ekpenede's house. Though it took him time to get there, but when he got to Ekpenede's house, he tapped on every hanged body at Ekpenede's house. When he found that of Iyase Ekpenede, of course he recognized his friend. He dropped him from the rope and he covered him with igbukmo. After covering his body, this sham was neutralized. If he had set his eyes on Iyase Ekpenede, his name could have been sorry. So through Ogboe, who was popularly called Adowenekode, this whole situation came to an end. This was the end of Iyase Ekpenede. So after the proper burial was given to Iyase Ekpenede by Ehengbuda, a shrine was built at the site of the house of Iyase Ekpenede at Ogbe. So till date, the site of Iyase Ekpenede has become a pilgrimage site for all chiefs. Earlier, there was a drum Iyase Ekpenede tied the rope he used for hanging himself. There was a drum he tied it to. So it is forbidden till date to beat a drum at the two shrines of Iyase Ekpenede, and they use traditional rumba shakers, the gongs and other materials to worship at the shrine. It is also forbidden for any Nwagwe of Benin to look at the shrine of Iyase Ekpenede. They turn their face to the opposite direction whenever they pass through that shrine till date in sort of shame. Before Iyase Ekpenede passed on, he had placed a curse on Nwagwe Osokrikpa for everything he did to him. So for the same reason, Idodia was unalived, the same circumstance fell upon Nwagwe Osokrikpa and he hanged himself years later. Until date, since 16th century, it is forbidden for any Iyase of Benin to live at Ogbe with the Oba, where the Oba resides. They live outside the walls of the Oba's palace. If you enjoyed this episode, like, share and comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. Thank you. Ekpenede,